business, and I've got one too. You can't mind your business. What's the matter with you?
Welcome to the latest episode of the Brand Shorthand Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Vandergrift, and today Lorraine and I pick up on the second part of our interview with Dr. Scott Powell, Professor of Marketing at Grove City College. We'll start with the last portion of where the interview left off last week so we can get a running start into the topic of repositioning Grove City College.
So if you're looking for some place that has a challenge and is conservative and Christian and you want to be able to afford it, we're kind of your place to go. And as Hillsdale has done a really good job with fundraising. I think they have like $1 billion endowment or something. It's very large.
And 98% of their donors have never stepped foot on the campus.
Yes. That used to be a really significant part of donations to our campus, but that's not as important as it used to be anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was assistant to the president in 1991, we would often get, letters from people. I appreciate your stance, and here's a check to support that. And it was really central to who we were.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as Hillsdale kind of started to own that position, and we kind of were going slightly different ways, that's when we had to kind of reposition a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about the time that you and Lorraine got invited over to help us, I had kind of come up with the idea of Ivy of a different league.
Mm-hmm.
We're an Ivy-like school in that we're very serious about academics, and we've got this beautiful campus that looks kind of Ivy League-ish, but we're not woke, and we're not. You're not going to go broke because of our tuition being so high, and so that was kind of a category that I was trying to figure out how to communicate that, and you guys came over and helped us pitch some ideas, and unfortunately, I was outgunned and outvoted, and we didn't end up going with you, which I think was to our true detriment. Because shortly after that, I gave up my position as marketing director and moved to faculty. And we've had like 4 or 5 different, how can I put this tactfully? 4 or 5 different directions that we've taken, that none of which I think are really truly differentiating or really clearly communicate who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And most recently, just about, I think 3 weeks ago, our marketing director retired. She resigned. And the president of the school called me down. He said, I'd like to talk to you about strategic marketing. And he said, what do you think some of the issues are that we have here at the school? And I said, well, number one is we've got so many different communication silos on campus. We kind of have the alumni office saying one thing, and development is saying one thing, and admissions is saying one thing, and we have a graduate program that's saying one thing, and we've got departments saying different things, and the sports, all the sports programs. And I'm like, there's just no unity in our message. And I said, I think we need someone to really bring all of that together, point us all in the same direction, and have a clear and compelling and concise position. And he not being a marketer, he's like, well, tell me, what do you mean by positioning? So I actually did a little primer for him and the vice presidents on kind of what is marketing strategy, what's positioning, how do you differentiate? And so I was encouraged that they wanted to hear that.
That's great.
Because I think we need to do a little bit better job of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to talk too much. I'm sorry if I'm too long-winded.
So where is, well, one of the things that you said, I think, is one of the, to those who are listening, this is something to watch out for. You said you had like 3 or 4 different directions within a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
One of those, and maybe even the tertiary one, could have been a fairly good direction. And it requires constancy and consistency, right? Sometimes it's not that there's a perfect position and you have the less perfect. It's if you say the same thing that has some value with constancy and consistency over time, it begins to take on, it's like a snowball going down the ski slope, right? It's going to get bigger and bigger. But when you truncate that constantly, and this year it's this, and next year it's that, and we're going to add to it and now devolve it, that's kind of a problem. Now, you said something too I'm interested in. You said, going back to the beginning, there was, and this almost relates to a Simon Sinek idea, there was a why. Like, why do we
Why?
exist? And we exist to create leaders. And I would add the word principled leaders.
Correct.
And where's that in today's narrative for the college?
Um, I meet with a lot of prospective faculty. Prospective students and their families. I always communicate that. I think I think some departments and what I'm calling silos, but just different communication um, departments on campus here. Some of us say that pretty consistently, but not all of us.
Hmm.
And I think that's a big problem. Everybody knows Nike's slogan is just do it. What's Puma's? I don't know. What's Adidas's? I don't know. For a while, it was impossible as nothing. I don't know if it's still that or not. But it's that consistency of, like you said, of saying the same thing repeatedly. Oh, I understand what this is about.
In the same way.
And I think,
largely in the same way.
Yeah. And I think we have not done as good a job of that as we can. And Grove City's not struggling. I think we're doing well, but I think we could do a lot better if we could more clearly articulate our position.
It's funny is in the church arena, because we all come out of churches if we're in the Christian realm like you are.
Right.
We get the VBS, the Vacation Bible School approach to marketing.
Right.
And the killer thing there is that what's typical with VBS, there's a new theme every year.
Right.
So every year it's a new theme, and we have to interest kids in a different way with a different theme. And that's what happens to marketing.
Yeah.
That's what fights again. The church is probably the worst in terms of being contrary to what Lorraine just said of consistency and constancy.
Yes, it is. And it's funny because I remember kind of fighting this battle when I was the marketing director, and I pitched this cord of three strands idea, that it's these three things that make us strong and unique. And I used to get pushback all the time. It's time for you to change that tagline. I'm like, no, it's time for you to come up with something new. You're getting paid every year and you're not creating anything new. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. And well, we're tired of seeing this. I'm like, I don't care. You're here. You're faculty. I'm trying to recruit new people. And as long as this keeps working, I'm not going to change it. I always tell my students the only time to change an ad campaign is when it stops working.
Yeah.
That's my belief.
Yep. That's absolutely true. I mean, that is the problem, that people, insiders, end up being saboteurs. Yeah.
I have one thing to share with you, Scott, and maybe this will help as you share with the leadership that's talked to you. We always say branding is boring business.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's boring for the people putting it on.
Yeah.
But if there's a place that has a completely new audience every year, it's a university.
Yes.
I mean, every year you have thousands of kids you're trying to reach that they might have started to hear about you 2-3 years ago, but they only got serious their junior and senior year.
Excuse me. Yes, you're right.
Yep. So they're going to have to, kind of live with whatever's developed, or you will go back to that VBS style of marketing.
Yep, absolutely.
So one of the, I think, concerning trends, not a fad, right, is that in the field of higher education, there's been a persistent dip in enrollment. And of course, the pandemic took a bigger dip, but it's still a dip historically from 2011 to 2022. And related to that, 41% of the students, males only represent 41% of the students now today. So it's skewed now more female. And I just wonder, how is that affecting Grove City College? How is it affecting your marketing? Have you seen that a dip in enrollment that's consistent with the larger scene, or have you been anomalously happy?
Yeah. So there's a couple things there. I think one of the biggest trends is that we are in an area of the United States, Western PA, Eastern Ohio, that not only has been losing people at a greater rate, but is projected to continue to lose population. If you look at the demographic trends, maybe it's the lovely weather we get here, but people aren't just dying to live here. and they are leaving the area,
Yeah.
which is a challenge when you're a regional school, which is predominantly Pennsylvania and the contiguous states, and you are having a smaller base to draw from or market to every year. That's a challenge for us.
Yeah.
I think the thing that has really helped us is the fact that there are fewer and fewer conservative schools each year.
Mhm.
And this week, I've met with students from Utah, California, Tennessee, and Texas that came here because they're like, we didn't know there was a school like you still around.
Oh,
So
wow.
while the demographics in our area have been against us, the fact that we are increasingly different than most universities that are becoming much more progressive and liberal and very different culture than we have here, we've benefited from people coming from larger distances. So we have not seen an enrollment drop. We've stayed really consistent. We're about 2,300 students every year, and that's right sized for us.
Yeah.
We
That's
don't really want to
super.
grow because that changes who we are. It changes the feel, and we've never had an enrollment issue. As for the males, we are anomalous. We actually had the last 2 years, our incoming classes were 54% male.
Oh, wow.
So we actually have a slight male majority by a few percentage points.
Yeah.
And I think one reason is that we have a lot of majors that tend to attract males.
Mhm.
We have a strong engineering program, strong business program, things that sometimes are a little more attractive to males.
Yeah.
Not that females don't find that interesting, but they skew heavily male.
Right.
Some of the harder sciences. So I don't know if it's that. We've noticed that we've been getting fewer applications from females, and the research that we've done is showing it because they tend to be more price sensitive.
Hmm.
And because we don't take federal funds and because we don't have $1 billion endowment, we're not as relatively affordable as we used to be. And we lose a lot of females who say, we would love to come here, but we just don't have the financial wherewithal to pay for that. Or we're getting a huge, discount or a huge scholarship elsewhere.
Right.
And males have not seemed to be quite as price sensitive.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question at all.
It does beautifully, and it shows that when you take these macro trends, they do factor in public institutions, private institutions, and so it's not always the same. I think to your credit, that's great, but it also suggests to me an opportunity. If this conservative value set is missing, and now your geography has expanded, there seems
Right.
like there's more opportunity through very targeted psychographic marketing to
Yes.
that ideal, to that mindset,
Yep.
to reach beyond the regional area. And are you
Right.
doing that? And if so, how?
Yeah, and you're exactly right. I could not agree
Mhm.
more. And when I met with the president about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I basically said, we have some challenges, but we also have some opportunities. I think our biggest challenge is not the demographic challenge right now. It is how do we reach a larger group of people from a more diverse geographic region? And
Mhm.
that's going to take some finances. And I looked over at the CFO, which kind of grimaced a little bit at me because they're always a little reticent to say, oh, yes, let's increase the marketing budget.
Mhm.
And I'm like, to do that, we're going to need to increase some marketing budgets here. So I think that's on the table, and I would say that they're receptive to that. Because if we continue to lose population in this area, and fewer people in general are going to college at all these days.
Mhm.
It's funny. I just read a Wall Street Journal article yesterday that was saying only about 38% of all Americans over the age of 25 have a BA degree, an undergraduate degree. Most people think it's higher than that, but it's
Yeah,
actually
I would.
in the high 30s, and it's dropping, and it's been dropping every year.
Wow.
Because people think, I'm not going to spend all this money to send my child somewhere and have them indoctrinated or not really prepare them for a career. And so I think the whole mindset of college itself is changing.
Yes,
So,
the idea that that's the only path for
right,
every child
right.
is
And it's
changed,
not. It's not.
and I
You
think that's actually healthy, right?
I agree.
And for a lot of reasons, but I would be interested because one of the definitions I've read about positioning by other writers is that your idea, you want to appeal to people who care a lot about what you value, right? So if
Right.
you value fast sports cars or
Yeah, I do.
affordable electric car, then that's what I need to talk about. So I
Right.
think it's interesting. There are people throughout this country who care a lot about conservative values,
Hmm.
and they're not in one geographic cluster. They're not like our urban centers of New York City or LA or all together in one fishbowl. And I think, Mark, you could probably talk to how to reach those people with that mindset affordably. That might be beneficial for you to hear because Mark is like an expert in
Oh,
some
yeah.
of the digital means that
Yep.
would actually, and not that we want you to say this to you always want more money, but but actually could be done with the same budget more effectively.
Yep.
So, Mark,
Correct.
why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, with programmatic, you're probably familiar with all those different channels, but the targeting capability that's available with connected TV, audio advertising, all of your search platforms are focused on that now,
Right.
and of course, social. You can do so much targeting now that is real time, and turn it on tomorrow, turn it off the next day, and the the return on that is far more impressive than just trying to do the broad based advertising that's been done in the past. A
Right.
lot of organizations, business to business especially, never thought TV was an option. But now, because I can go out there and I can reach a family that has, teenage people in it, that has a capability to be very attractive to organizations like a university. And you already have your modes of going out and selling and being at college fairs and things like that, but even as you travel geographically to do that, you're not, I mean, you do have to spend more money because a like if you come over to Cuyahoga Valley Christian Academy, which is
Right.
north of us about a half
Yep.
an hour,
Very
for
familiar.
you all that's like an hour and 15-minute trip.
Hmm.
But if you go out to Indiana, now you're looking at 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, so your staff has to pay more to get out there.
Yep.
It would be much better to develop that advertising that brings the prospect to you rather than having to go the other way with it.
Right.
So geographically, the way that you could expand that way is through the programmatic channels that are available that have a lot of targeting involved. And we know we had Roy Williams on here
Yeah, I watched it.
last year, yeah,
Yeah.
and he was against targeting entirely. And I think he's talking about
Yeah.
retail and he's talking about many times very local organizations, and we couldn't agree with him more. But when you're looking at this scenario where your dollar's only going to go so far
Right.
and you need every impression to count, those programmatic channels that are available now are just, they're so attractive. You can't argue with them. They might cost more per impression. You only have maybe 5 to 10% wasted impression instead of 90 to 95% wasted impression.
Yeah.
It's almost upside down in terms of that. So,
Yeah.
And since I'm the oldest person on this panel by far, um, I'm going to go
Maybe
back
not.
to something I long ago used to introduce a new brand of cat litter and have forgotten about. And it was called indexing markets.
Hmm.
Like
yeah.
we actually indexed markets by
Yep.
cat ownership. And therefore, we didn't have money to spend everywhere. So
Right.
we decided to pick off the top 10 markets because we could
Yep.
afford to be in those markets. And
Right.
indexing combined with the programmatic and the targeting today still seems to me to be a perfect blend of old school, new school.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. Point. It's not out with the old and in with the new. I think
yeah,
it's a combination. I think it's a both and. And
right.
using
Mhm.
them together, I think is a really effective means of reaching audience. I mean, that's why Walmart just spent what $2 billion to buy Vizio TV because of the set top data that they're going to acquire and to be able
Yep.
to understand what are people watching and how do we target different products to them based on their viewing preferences. So yeah, the whole move towards programmatic and retail media, I think is proof that this works.
Yeah.
Yeah, the psychographic targeting is unbelievable. It's a little scary. And
Yeah,
with AI now, they're
right,
able to quickly develop models that you wouldn't otherwise be able to figure out on your own.
right. Yeah. But you're
Yeah.
exactly right. I mean, our product is one, our college is one that definitely needs to do psychographic modeling and targeting
Right.
because we're looking for a particular kind of student here. We're not
And I
for
think a
everyone.
particular type of family who supports that
Correct.
student,
Yeah.
because I
Correct.
know some people from our church who attended your college. In fact, I think we interviewed them, and not most higher ed involves parents as well too,
Right.
um, especially when you're talking about living on campus type of situation. But I think what came across very loud and clear was the decision for Grove City seemed to be more influenced by family commitment than other schools like Ohio
Mhm.
Yeah.
State or well, maybe Ohio State's a bad example because people are rabid about that. But it
Yeah.
just seemed there was a lot more involvement and appreciation for the values of the school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's why I love teaching here. It's like a teacher's dream. I go into the classroom in the morning. Students are respectful. They're sitting there. They have their notebooks open, ready to learn. I'm like, you guys are a teacher's dream. I can't imagine what some classrooms are like these days, and the students aren't motivated to learn and they don't really care.
Yeah.
But it's really nice to be in a place where students really are really desirous of learning and willing to work hard to learn. Um, and so yeah, it's kind of a unique student that we bring here that
Mhm.
I'm blessed to be able to teach.
When I taught there, it was night and day compared to some other colleges that I go into and lecture. The students at Grove City were outstanding. The engagement with the questions that evening that I did the lecture, and then the next day in the classroom, all attentive. And I think you were the only one that fell asleep while I was lecturing.
I didn't think you saw me. Yeah. Well,
So, Mark,
it's
you
it.
you could
Yeah,
have been a pastor.
I could have
That was
been.
going to be your
yeah,
direction, but the Lord directed your steps elsewhere, as I heard.
that's
That
right.
was your
Well,
plan.
ironically, I was in seminary in Indiana, just like where Scott was, and God directed us otherwise. So,
Oh my God, that's so
Well,
funny.
I was the
That's so,
black sheep because both my father and my grandfather were pastors, one for 52 years, the other for 42 years.
oh, God bless.
And it started a very large church here. And I was just the quote heir apparent. I was next in line. And I'm like, that's just not my calling. And for a while, I was kind of the family black sheep, but they've
Yeah.
accepted me now that I'm a teacher instead of a preacher.
One of the other questions I had was it's kind of an interesting thing, all this uh, politicking about the government
Right.
freeing students from debt. An NPR survey showed that most Americans prefer that the government help rein in college costs. Now, you don't accept government funding, so,
Right.
but they rather than forgiving debt.
Right.
So, I guess the question is, we're in this idea today of the affordability of the 4-year college. And
Right.
while I think it's good to have other paths open and vocational, and I certainly applaud that.
Yep.
Um, what effect do you think that the higher costs have had on maybe deterring students who should choose a 4-year
Right.
college as a path?
First of all, I completely agree. I don't think a
Mhm.
4-year college is right for everyone. I think there are a lot of students who have abilities and career paths that a vo-tech school or a technical school or even a high school degree where you can get on the job training are really the best courses of action for them.
Mhm.
That said, the students that do want a 4-year education, most colleges are spending so profligately.
Mhm.
It's ridiculous how much
Mhm.
money is spent. Grove City has always, by definition, kind of been forced to be a little bit more efficient with their use of money because we don't get any government funds.
Right.
Right.
And we don't have a huge endowment to just, rest on our laurels and take all the interest and spend as we wish. So we've always been kind of forced to be efficient. And I like that. It's kind of in our DNA.
Yeah.
Um, and again, it's hard. I feel bad for these students that actually graduate with mountains of debt.
Oh.
And I'm
Mhm.
like, how especially if it's in a career path that's a really valuable career but may not pay a lot of money. If I'm a social work major and I'm coming out and I've got $90,000 in debt, how do I pay? That
There's
just
no
seems
way.
responsible to me, not for the person, but for schools to do that to someone.
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
I totally agree. And I think what's happened is we went through this empire building phase, right? Where everywhere you turn, they're building new buildings and new amenities and all to attract students. And it was if there was never going to come a day when you had to pay the piper. I mean,
right,
and then to participate too, I think in forcing students to take loans or to, let's say, this is the bad use of marketing, to
right.
incentivize students to take loans that their career would never pay back in a
Yeah,
reasonable lifetime, I think is
right.
criminal. Yeah.
I
I
agree.
hope that stops.
And it's like those credit cards, no credit,
Mhm.
bad credit. We've got a card for you. It's only 70% interest.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, here's someone who dug themselves into a hole and you're giving them a bigger shovel. I
Yeah.
just don't think that's good
No,
marketing.
it's not
Yeah.
responsible at all.
I
So,
agree.
and I know Grove City, from what you said earlier, you're managing your size, you're managing because
Right,
you feel that that's key to the quality and the type of education and even who you are DNA wise. I
right.
wish more colleges had that kind of tether to their position, to their idea of who they are and what they offer. That's a
Yeah,
powerful thing.
I agree. And it's just fortuitous that God led me here because I didn't know a lot about colleges. And I just happened to be connected with one that I think has done a really responsible job and is trying to really do a good job of educating students without, financially paralyzing them for years. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Very
good.
good.
Well, this has
Yep.
been such a pleasure. Thank you for having me, guys. Lorraine, it was so nice catching up with you. It's been too long.
It's really good catching up with you.
This concludes our interview with Dr. Scott Powell. A huge thank you to Dr. Powell for taking the time to chat with us and give us insights on how he's integrating positioning into the world of academia and what's happening at Grove City College. As always, we ask that you like, share, comment, and tell others about the Brand Shorthand podcast, where we cover the principles of positioning and all things marketing. Until next time, have an amazing day. Against
Yep.
the hour here, and
Okay.
I mentioned to you, Scott, potentially talking a little bit about Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
And we're doing an episode here in 2 weeks about experiential marketing.
Okay.
We use the progression of brands up that hierarchy of needs to explain why experiential marketing has even come on the scene.
Yeah.
But since you did your thesis, was that your MBA or doctoral?
It was actually a project for one of my doctoral courses, and it's funny that you say that because I was just, teaching about that in class this morning, my consumer
Okay.
behavior class.
Oh, cool.
Well, very good. Are you teaching it in the sense of the way brands have progressed through the years toward what we're now calling experiential marketing?
Yeah, I'm kind of building on that. So in the class, the topic today was motivation and looking at what motivates people to buy certain things. And so we talked about, Maslow's hierarchy. And my paper, I took a little different approach because he's kind of like the father of motivational theory.
Mhm.
I wanted to know what motivated him to be a motivational researcher.
Oh,
And
interesting.
it's a really interesting background of why he got into the field that he did. And then we kind of look at the pyramid and say, okay, which brands are kind of positioning themselves as this? We're going to meet your safety needs, your security needs, yeah. But today's focus was really on just the concept of understanding your clients' or prospects' desires. What motivates them? What's the motive for them trying to buy something like this?
So what was your conclusion as to why he got into it?
It was really interesting because the more I read and studied him, the easier it was. He had a very dysfunctional and very abusive childhood. And
Huh.
he literally said, I hated my mother. And my entire life work was aimed at refuting everything that she told me. And apparently she was very cold, very abusive, very detached. And if you recall, he got into rhesus monkey research where they would take monkeys one away from the mother and one would stay with a nurturing mother and one would go onto this kind of wire mannequin. And the mannequin monkey that never received love ended up being very, very angry and violent and not well balanced. And
Right.
he said, I've always wondered, why wasn't I like the monkey? Because I never had motherly love. And what motivated me not to sadly commit suicide or to give up,
Hmm.
given that the sad childhood that I had. And it's a really interesting path that took him into studying motivational theory.
Huh.
That's really
Interesting.
interesting because one of our clients, Dr. Merle Griff, created Sarah Care, which is adult day day care as opposed to assisted living.
Okay.
And she is actually trained as a child psychologist from Temple University in Philadelphia. And she has said we were in a book club, and she made the statement that a child deprived of mother's love almost never recovers.
No,
So
it's true.
here's an example
Yep.
of someone who recovered. It'd be really interesting to know what else happened in his life, because you will find that this is a pretty common problem in today's society with those people
Yeah.
who become sociopathic or psychopathic or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's a very interesting topic to me.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, this
Yep.
has been such a pleasure. Thank you for having me, guys.
Thank
Oh, my
you.
God.
We appreciate it. And we'll probably chunk this up into a couple episodes since we got in over an hour here.
Yeah.
And we'll let you know beforehand when it's ready to publish. And first one will be on Monday, early morning. So
Okay.
we'll see how it edits out. And, let us know what your students think. I think you have to make it required listening, right? Their homework assignment.
Right.
Yeah, and you're coming over in a few weeks, so I'll make
Yeah,
the
April 18th, I
Yeah,
think.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. And
Lorraine-
we'll have our discussion about the Nephilim and everything else.
That's good. I'd
We're
like
gonna get there. We'll try to get there Wednesday night.
Yes, good.
We'll let the girls go shopping so my wife can do what she loves to do and your wife can do it without you around.
Like it. Sounds good. Lorraine, it was so nice catching up with you. It's been too long.
Yeah, well, good catching up with you too. If you cut this out, Mark, that'll be good. But
Yes,
if you ever need an adjunct professor, I'd be available to do
Awesome.
that.
Yeah, that's great.
Because
I'll
my
have to keep you in
relationship with
mind.
Innis is I'm no longer an associate of Innis, but obviously I stay very close because we built together the positioning practice that we use. So
good.
So I'll
Well,
put
if you
that
don't
out.
mind, send me your contact information.
Okay, I will do that because I
The
love
best
to
way to
teach.
contact you.
I was going to tell you, I started teaching. I was a teaching fellow at North Texas State, which is now University of North Texas. But
Okay.
my master's was in art. And so I was teaching art, and I had all these students who were art majors. And I said, you need to have a sketchbook. And I would give them assignments, either a watercolor a week and I remember them complain. I remember the whole group rallied and complained. We didn't think we'd have homework. I'm like, this is your major. Like, you don't become an artist by an hour in a studio.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was like
Yeah.
mind-boggling. Mrs. Kessler, we didn't think we'd have homework.
Yeah, I've had a few students like that over the years too. Yeah.
Oh, it was crazy. But anyway, it was really good catching up with you. I think this is going to be a great session. So
yeah, I wish you the best, and I hope things go well with your dog, and you get many more days and years of.
I know.